From Blackfoot to Teton, we've got your District 6 breakdown right here on the East Idaho Prepcast with Lance Taylor.
That's right. It is time for another edition of the East Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down all that District 6 action you need to know about. Brandon Baney with Lance Taylor. The East Idaho Prepcast brought to you by Pure Adrenaline Motorsports, your source for pulse-pounding adrenaline sports and sports apparel and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash your inner beast. Lance, can you tell it's the morning? I haven't had enough coffee yet.
Yeah, morning time always takes a little while to get going.
No doubt. Those are, again, some awesome shades you're sporting there with the Pure Adrenaline Motorsports
Yeah,
logo.
And now these shades can be picked up, be purchased at all good-to-go stores in Idaho, and also Bill's Bike and Run in Idaho they can be picked up at.
Awesome. That's big.
Yeah,
that's really big when you can get that in-store distribution. So that's awesome and exciting news for Pure Adrenaline Motorsports, the great sponsor of this East Idaho Prepcast. All right, Lance, it's time to look at some brackets. State soccer has finally arrived. District 6, well represented. I figured we'll just kind of start at 5A and work our way down. That sound all right?
That sounds perfect to me.
Okay, let's pop up the 5A boys state soccer bracket. You've got Thunder Ridge as the number 4 seed. Now, if you're watching the video of this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page, you'll see that we have put the brackets up on the screen. Might want to go full size on your player so you can see the bracket more clearly. If you're just listening to the audio on IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcasts, just try to follow along as best you can. Thunder Ridge is the number 4 seed. The teams that qualified this year were seeded 1 through 8 based upon their max preps ranking at the end of the regular season. They will play Boise, the number 5 seed, right away. That is a tough opening round matchup, Lance.
Well, and that is your premier opening round matchup as well, because statistically, based upon max preps, those are the 2 closest teams. Middle of your bracket is always your most competitive. I shouldn't say always, but typically your most competitive. We'll see how that plays out during the tournament as well, but that is definitely going to be a game to watch.
And Thunder Ridge is also on the same side of the bracket as number 1 Lake City. Lake City went undefeated this year, Lance, but those teams up north are always kind of the big unknowns because it's like, well, what kind of competition did they really play? Except for this year, Lake City was able to play both Madison and Thunder Ridge. They traveled up to Coeur d'Alene early on in the season and did a little weekend series. So it's going to be interesting if we see Lake City and Thunder Ridge potentially in the semifinals as well. Yeah,
it very well could be. And, you never know. However teams play, you might have a all Southeast Idaho State Championship as well.
Yes, that Lake City Thunder Ridge matchup from earlier this year, Lake City won 2-1. So pretty tight matchup back then. If we go to the bottom of the bracket, Madison also qualified for state by finishing second at districts. They are the number 7 seed. They will take on second seeded Timberline. Timberline looks awfully good this year, Lance, but Madison maybe can play the role of spoiler here. They're the only non-Southern Idaho Conference team on this side of the bracket because you've also got number 3 Bora and number 6 Rocky Mountain.
That's right. And so, Madison, I'm sure they go in. As they look at those rankings and where they're sitting with max preps, I'm sure they go into that with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder and say, you know what, we're gonna prove something here.
Yeah, so they'll hopefully crash the all District 3 party there on that side of the bracket. If we move on to the 5A girls. Obviously, Highland, undefeated regular season. They are the number 1 overall seed. A rematch of the district championship. They will play 8th-seeded Thunder Ridge right away. So familiar opponents. For Thunder Ridge, who hasn't beaten Highland yet this year, does that give them the advantage? It's so hard to beat the same opponent so many times in one season.
It is. However, I think that's just a little bit different in soccer. For whatever reason, it just feels a little different in soccer. I expect Highland to win this game and move on. Yep. As my phone goes off.
That's $1, Lance. That's a $1.
That down. Yeah, there we go. Now it's down,
Hey, no worries. So yeah, Thunder Ridge, the 8 seed, playing Highland, undefeated regular season. The Max Preps rankings this year, Lance, were designed to avoid these sorts of divisional matchups right away at state that we had seen, especially in District 6 with basketball last year. But it's funny how it worked out, where so many conference opponents are playing each other. But at least when they're
you look at the bottom half of this conference right now, or of this bracket, it's all the same conference.
Yes, 4 teams from District 3 at the bottom of the bracket. Number 3, Boise. Number 6, Eagle. Number 2, Rocky Mountain. Number 7, Centennial. But at least now that they're seeded, I'm okay with it if 2 conference teams match up. When it was predetermined, it's like you could avoid this, and they didn't. So I know
I
in
agree
District
fully. And I think going off the rankings and seeding them in that direction, I think it's going to give us better championship games. I think the potential is there. It's it's not always the teams that that are seeded, that you think, or that are seeded high, that you think are going to be there, that end up being there. But nonetheless, it gives you the best opportunity.
Yeah, I know all of our Skyline fans that are watching were really not happy last year when both their boys and girls basketball teams had to play a district opponent for the 6th time at state in the opening round. So speaking of Skyline, if we move on to the 4A side of things, the Skyline girls, they're looking awfully good, Lance. They're the number 2 overall seed. They will play 7th seeded Moscow in the opening round. Moscow is a team, Lance, that really isn't supposed to be here. They were playing undefeated Sandpoint in their district championship game. It was won 1-0 on a penalty kick. And so here's Moscow ready to crash the party. Skyline, though, I think should be heavily favored in this matchup.
Yeah, I think they should be, and I think Skyline. I mean, this could potentially, for Skyline. I think this is a good bracket for them. I think this is a very good bracket. I look at that and say, hey, Skyline could really legitimately find themselves in that state championship game against a number of good teams, but statistically, Twin Falls should be in that game with them. But I think Skyline looks at this and says, you know what, we could win a state championship here.
Yeah, Skyline is on the same side of the bracket as number 3 Canyon Ridge and number 6 Valley View, and then up top, I think number 1 Twin Falls and number 5 Bishop Kelly might play a really entertaining semifinal matchup. So
yeah.
But I agree, it sets up very well for Skyline to possibly meet up with one of those teams in the championship matchup. And this is what we talked about, right? With the seeding, you're getting potentially better championship matches, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. 4A boys, if we switch over to the boys side, now these competitions will be taking place at Brothers Park in Caldwell. Hillcrest, just like the Skyline girls, Hillcrest is the number 2 seed overall at this tournament. They will play 7th seeded Preston. These 2 teams, Lance, played, if you remember, all the way back in the season opener, way back in late August. And Hillcrest won that game pretty convincingly. I think it was 3-1. So here's the rematch.
Well, and for Hillcrest, that really as a school has not had a lot to cheer about this fall. This is a great opportunity for them to step up and get their name up there in something, because they've struggled in some of the other sports, and I think for Hillcrest, this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, now let's pull up this bracket again and look. Again, I think their side of the bracket is set up pretty well, actually. You've got the 3rd seed Sandpoint, again, a team up north. They're always the wild card.
Yep.
Number 6 Canyon Ridge as well. I think Hillcrest, I think they get past Preston pretty easily and probably playing Sandpoint, maybe Canyon Ridge, but I think they win that matchup as well. And then you're talking about up top on this bracket. I'm not sure who comes out of that. It's pretty top heavy, I would say, as we transition to the other District 6 team that made it, and that is Blackfoot, the Cinderella darling, right? They came into districts as the 3 seed, sub 500 record. They upset Skyline in the semis. They upset Hillcrest in the championship. So Blackfoot is actually your district champion, and because of the Max Preps rankings this year, Lance, they only factor in your regular season rankings. What you do in districts doesn't count towards your seeding. So even though Blackfoot won districts, they are the 8th seed overall, playing number 1 Jerome. Now Jerome is a team that I think in a lot of years probably wouldn't be ranked number 1. They had a lot of ties this year, and because they had ties instead of losses, that elevated them to the number 1 position. So for Blackfoot, I think this is actually a decent draw.
Yeah, I think it is for Blackfoot as well. I think this is a 1-8 matchup that they look at and say, "Hey, this is a winnable one." It's not a matchup that the team's going in saying, "Hey, let's just not get blown out. Let's keep it respectable." This is what I think they feel they can win.
And in terms of coaching, there aren't many that are better than Liam Pope at Blackfoot.
Yeah, that is true.
One of the best coaches around. So moving on to the 3A ranks, let's start with the 3A boys. Sugar Salem comes in as the number 3 seed overall. They will take on 6th seeded Bonners Ferry. Bonners Ferry almost won the district title up north. They lost to Coeur d'Alene Charter on penalty kicks. So they're going to be coming in motivated. But for Sugar Salem, again, I think this bracket sets up really well because you've also got number 2 American Falls and number 7 Teton on the side of the bracket. So kind of all the East Idaho teams are all jumbled up.
And that's a tough side of the bracket. That is a very tough side of the bracket. And, you look at Sugar Teton and what they went through during the regular season with each other, as far as splitting. And I mean, you're talking some good teams on that side of the bracket. However, I feel Sun Valley Charter, I think they're the team with the target on their back. I think they've got the best path to the state championship. And I think they're going to be very, very tough to beat.
Yeah, on the top of the bracket, of course, Sun Valley Community School, the Cutthroats, the number 1 seed. Yeah. They are such a dominant force. I think overall Sun Valley wins the title. It's just a matter of who matches up with them. Could we see a Sugar or Teton semifinal, Lance? American Falls had a nice regular season, but so did Teton.
That's right. And really, I think of the 3 boys tournaments going on up there, I think this is the most competitive, and with the exception of Sun Valley Community School, I think you take the other 7 the other 7 teams, and I think that's pretty tight. I think that's a pretty tight race, and you look at that bottom half of the bracket, and wow, that's going to be competitive. That is going to be very competitive.
Yeah, it's very surprising that Teton, was seeded so low, right? Just the 7th seed. I thought they had a really good regular season. Now, American Falls and Teton did play once this season. It was in the middle of September, really kind of later September. American Falls won 2-1. So we'll see what happens in the rematch. But you're talking about potentially an all District 6 semifinal, Sugar and Teton. So let's move on to the 3A girls, where, again, Sugar Salem has qualified. It seems like every sport, Sugar is always at state at least. They are the 5 seed, Lance. They're on the top half of the bracket. They will take on 4th seeded Marsh Valley. This, to me, is the most intriguing matchup because Marsh Valley kind of breezed through the regular season. They didn't lose to a 3A opponent. But the question is, Sugar Salem is battle tested, and will that give them the edge over Marsh Valley in this 5 versus 4 matchup?
The latter part of the season, might have changed Sugar a little bit. You look at these 2 teams; they played twice during the regular season. Marsh Valley winning one, and then they tied one. So Sugar has not beat Marsh Valley this year, and this could be a very good matchup. And for Sugar, they would really like to get back to that state championship game. And that they lost in a year ago, and if you're Marsh Valley, Sugar's one of those schools that's kind of been king of the hill for a lot of sports, and that's a big name to beat. And so, I think Marsh Valley will bring their best as well. That's a pick'em game. If that was a Vegas spread there, that would be a close enough spread that it'd be a pick'em.
Yeah, for sure. I think whoever escapes that opening round match, Lance, I think is going to have a pretty tough time with the top seed Fruitland in the semifinals. Fruitland is the number 1 overall seed. They went undefeated against 3A competition. They have a girl, Abby Rubidoux, who's averaging 9 points per game. That's goals and assists. So if you think about, they're basically scoring 9 goals a game.
That's right. That's tough.
Which is tough to stop. So I think Fruitland advances to the championship from that top half. The bottom half, Coeur d'Alene Charter as the number 2 seed is so dominant. They've won how many titles in a row now? Right?
Yeah, a lot. And they go in with that mental factor of saying, we know what it takes to win this. And there's no unknown for them. They know all about this tournament. They know what it takes to win it. And I think they come out of that bottom half of the bracket.
Yeah, Teton as the 7 seed will get Coeur d'Alene Charter right off the bat, and I think Coeur d'Alene Charter wins that contest and advances to the championship. The only reason Coeur d'Alene Charter isn't the number 1 overall seed is because at the very end of the regular season, they had a game that was forfeited by St. Mary's. So they had an open date, and they said, well, who can we play? They said, well, let's play Sandpoint. Sandpoint went undefeated, and it was kind of a last minute, hey, let's schedule this game. Sandpoint won 2-1, and because of that loss, that dropped them to the number 2 seed. So
Yep. Yeah, there's always those intricacies that make a difference on there. And I think, I think Coeur d'Alene Charter is going to be very, very good. In fact, to be honest with you, they're my odds-on favorite to win it.
Yeah, me too.
Again, so.
Yep, I completely agree with that. So that's kind of a look at the state soccer brackets. East Idaho very well represented. I think there's potential for several teams to bring home a trophy. It may not be the state trophy, but there's going to be a lot of trophies, I think, coming back.
Well, you got 3 chunks of hardware that are brought back, and some of those are going to come to East Idaho.
Yeah, I guess they're not trophies, right? They're plaques. Yeah.
Well, it's a Plophy. A plaque-trophy.
A Plophy.
That's a new word. or a track. No, because that's a sport, so that doesn't work, a trophy plaque. But we'll call them a Plophy.
We'll see if some of those East Idaho teams can bring home a Plophy from state. So, all right, let's move on to what happened in football last week. There's just been some wild games lately, Lance. I think we have to start in the 4A ranks, the High Country Conference, where it is completely upside down right now. You had Shelley at Blackfoot, a game that goes to double overtime. And Blackfoot this year, they may petition to ban the 2-point conversion because they've now lost 4 games this year because of 2-point conversions, 3 times where they failed to convert. And this time in double overtime, Shelley does convert the 2-point conversion and they win 29-28. Blackfoot is now 3-5 overall, Lance. There's this big, crazy 4-way tie for first place right now with Skyline, Bonneville, Shelley, and Blackfoot. They're all 2-1 in the league.
Well, and that's really a game that, to be honest with you, I thought Blackfoot was going to win. In fact, in our podcast last week, I picked Blackfoot. I felt that they were the better team. I felt the chip that they were going to bring into that was going to be a little more than that of Shelley. The game was played in Blackfoot, but Shelley has, with the exception of the couple hiccups that they got, of course, a big hiccup is when they lost to Bonneville, but Shelley has proven to be a formidable opponent. And we know Blackfoot has talent, particularly in the receiving core. We know that they've got a lot of talent. But I just think a lot of it at this point of the season is unrealized. I think they were starting to realize that when they picked up the win over Skyline earlier in the season. I was actually on the call for that game with Tim Belknap. But they've just kind of, I don't know. I think Blackfoot is underachieving based upon the talent that they put on the field, and Shelley might even be overachieving a bit.
Yeah, this is going to be a wild last week of the regular season, Lance, when you look at the High Country Conference in 4A, because you've got these 4 teams that are all jumbled together, that they're all playing each other. Bonneville is at Blackfoot, and Skyline will host Shelley. That Shelley Skyline game, by the way, will be on IdahoSports.com this Friday night. So who controls their own destiny in terms of winning the league, Lance? Believe it or not, Bonneville does. If Bonneville beats Skyline, they could potentially win if Bonneville beats Blackfoot.
I know what you meant.
Right. They could potentially win the conference title. They would need Shelley to defeat Skyline as well, and then they would have the head-to-head tiebreaker over Shelley since they beat them 13-7.
And I think Skyline, my picks for this game, I think Skyline beats Shelley, and I think Bonneville gets probably 2 or 3 touchdown beat by Blackfoot. I think Blackfoot handles them 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Okay, so if that happens, Lance, then you've got Skyline winning the conference.
That's right.
They and Blackfoot, Skyline's the other team that controls their destiny somewhat.
That's right.
Because Skyline beat Blackfoot head-to-head. So, I mean, I didn't spend a ton of time beating my head
Actually, Blackfoot beat Skyline head-to-head.
Right. Sorry. So Blackfoot would get the first place.
That's right.
Here's what's at stake, right? The district champion will get a first round bye and a top 5 seed. And to be honest, it'll probably be the number 5 seed if it's Shelley or Skyline or Bonneville or Blackfoot. Whoever wins it will probably get the 5 seed overall, just because they've all beaten up on each other this year.
Yeah.
I didn't spend too much time beating my head against the wall trying to figure out who, if this happens, then this team wins the league. And if this happens, this team wins the league, because no matter what happens, Skyline, Blackfoot, Shelley, all comfortably in the playoffs right now based upon their Max Preps rankings.
That's right. And, and then when you get there, who has advantage? Well, Skyline does. They're coming off state championship. And again, they got that mental advantage of, we know how to be here. We know what it takes to win. Now that doesn't always translate to a state championship, but it certainly gives you a mental edge. And I think a mental edge is worth at least a touchdown.
They do have the confidence, and they have a lot of those players returning from last year that were maybe in more complimentary or reserve roles that are now in the spotlight, right? Guys like Abron Silverio and Kenyon Sadiq and Tui Edwin on the line. And I mean, they're good. Skyline's just fine. And
there's no question that they are tested. Skyline is tested. They've played some good teams this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so perplexing to watch Blackfoot and Skyline both take Rigby to the wire, essentially, and then turn around the next week and struggle with somebody in their own classification. So, So Shelley, Skyline, Blackfoot are all in comfortably. Bonneville is the team that's on the bubble right now. If the playoffs started today, Lance, Bonneville would get the final at-large bid. And they would be the 15 seed overall.
And a loss to Blackfoot would put them out of that, essentially. But I think, Bonneville has improved. They're a better team this year than they were last year. Not winning a game last year. And, of course, it took them a chunk of the season this year to pick up their first win
now
over top of Shelley. And but I think Bonneville I think next year they might make quite a bit of a roar. I just don't see it happening this year.
Head coach Kevin Kempf has done a fantastic job in his second year as the head coach.
Very much so.
I mean, he came in last year losing basically every starter and almost every assistant coach. He was literally starting from scratch with this team. Now, here's the interesting thing with Bonneville. If you look right now, the only teams they're competing with for that last at-large spot are basically Moscow and Century. Those are the three teams. Bonneville has a 4.1 rating on Max Preps. Moscow has a 1.6, and Century has a 0.6. Now, Century plays Pocatello this Friday. Moscow is done. They don't have a game this week.
Yeah, that's right. They are. It's a bye.
So they're idle. So here's how it works. If Century beats Pocatello, which 2% chance of happening, but it could. If Century does, they jump ahead and get that last spot because that's a big signature win. If Bonneville wins, obviously they get that last spot. If Bonneville loses and keeps it close, there's like a 15-point threshold that's used to determine.
Yeah, that's right.
Quality win versus quality loss. I think if Bonneville, even if they lose and it's kind of a close game, I still think Bonneville gets that last spot, believe it or not.
Yeah, and Bonneville is good enough to potentially keep this game close. I don't think they're good enough to win it, but I think they are good enough to keep this game close.
Yeah, I mean, and then as I said, they would be the 15 seed overall because there's an automatic bid from District 4 Mountain Home that is clearly the worst team in the field, and they'll get the 16 seed.
Yeah.
So I mean, Bonneville has a lot to play for, which is crazy to think. 3 weeks ago, we wouldn't have thought that was possible.
No.
They are. Yeah. So
they're moving up. They're moving up. They're not totally there yet, but they will be there. They're coached very well.
Yes. Equally as chaotic, Lance, is the 5A High Country Conference. The big game we had last week on IdahoSports.com was a Rigby, honestly, a thrashing, 44-21 over Highland. Rigby really imposed their will in the second half. Highland could not stop the big plays. Tiger Adolfo had an 80-yard touchdown run. Zeke Falavai had a big 44-yard touchdown run. And Rigby again showing that they are the class of this league.
Well, we talked about that game last week, how that was going to be won in the trenches, and it was. When you get runs like that, those runs come from the trenches doing their jobs. And Rigby was just that much better. But you know what? Highland has a chance to bounce back this week, and I'll tell you what, their game is one of the top two, I think, most intriguing games in Idaho this week.
And I've said this to Highland fans and Highland supporters, because now everyone's thinking, oh, Highland must not be very good. I think Highland is good. I think Rigby is just like really, really like Rigby makes everybody look bad. I think Highland is still a top 5 team in the state.
Yeah. I think Highland is a very good team. But it's going to take something pretty special for someone to step up and knock off Rigby. I think
they're on another level right now. So here's the interesting part. Rigby didn't officially clinch the district yet. They still have to win this matchup with Madison on Friday because Madison knocks off Idaho Falls 21-17.
That's right. And I think this Madison team, I mean, we've got to remember, last year when Madison and Rigby played, of course, the game was in Rigby. Madison was not a good team last year, and they actually hung really good with Rigby through the first half. And so I think, if you're Madison, you build on that. You build on, the success of your 5 wins this season. And I think those players go in feeling in their heart that there's a potential upset.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been incredible. Madison made this quarterback change 2 weeks ago, and they are a completely different team now, it appears. Yeah. So that's one interesting game. And then the other interesting game, of course, is Idaho Falls taking on Highland in a game that's kind of a must-win for both, because Idaho Falls right now, Lance, their playoff chances are not looking good, right? They're on the wrong side of tiebreakers with Rigby.
That's right.
And Madison, and if they lose to Highland, they're done. Because if they lose to Highland, then Highland, Madison, Rigby get the 3 automatic spots, and you would think, well, Idaho Falls still has a chance for the at-large, right? They would be 6-3 at that point. That's still pretty good. Well, in 5A, the at-large bid is determined by it's not determined by your max preps ranking. It's determined by your winning percentage against quote unquote big schools. That's 5A. Right. That's 5A schools and out-of-state opponents that have an enrollment of 1280 or higher. Mm-hmm. And that's where Idaho Falls' schedule really cost them this year, because their record against big schools, quote unquote, is 1-2. All those wins they've piled up have been against 4A teams from the High Country Conference. None of those will help out the Tigers. Well,
and I think as you look at Idaho Falls, this is a team that started out gangbusters, and it's not like, I wouldn't say there was a huge drop off. I'm just saying, obviously they started playing against some better competition. They ended up losing those games, but they were a team that we were talking about a little over a week ago, that it looked like pretty sure that they were going to get in. I think you and I both, pardon me, I think you and I both had them beating Madison. I know I did. Madison stepped up and won that game. So Idaho Falls, they truly control their destiny here tonight. Or this week, I should say. That game's actually going to be played in Holt Arena, is what I show. I thought Highland was going to host that on their home field, but I am showing Holt Arena right now.
Yeah.
But Idaho Falls, I don't know if their line in the trenches can handle Highland. And so that's interesting. If I was picking that game and if I was putting money on that game, I would put it on Highland.
Yeah, Idaho Falls. So with Highland, they were supposed to play some games outdoors this year, but they had some construction projects going on to make their facility more accommodating, more accommodating to playing.
More user friendly.
Yes, right. Yes. But with COVID-19 and the pandemic and all this stuff, of course, every construction project is behind schedule. Yeah. So they had to move all of their games into Holt Arena this year. So that's what's happening there. So here, Idaho Falls, their only chance, and I reached out to the athletic director at Idaho Falls and I didn't hear back yet. The only chance for Idaho Falls is to beat Highland and have Rigby beat Madison. And that would create a 3-way tie between Highland, Idaho Falls, and Madison for the second, third, and fourth place positioning.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that tiebreaker was settled. Nobody was able to tell me. So
yeah, I don't know for sure either. All we would know there is that they all get in at that point. All three of them should get in at that point. Is that correct? And then you break that tie through is it a Kansas City playoff?
It may have to be because if Idaho Falls ends up on the wrong side of that tiebreaker and they're still fourth, they don't get in. They have to basically get one of those three automatic bids, and they have to be on the right side of a three-way tie.
That's right. Yeah, we need to get some clarification on how that would handle or how that would be played out if it's a tie. Historically, in other situations, we saw it go through with the Mountain Rivers Conference 3A last year, where there was a three-way tie for district, and they did a Kansas City playoff at Madison High School, where Sugar and South made their way into the state tournament that way. But I'm assuming that's probably what would happen here, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Lance, that as last week I did a big bracketology post with all the playoff scenarios, and it made my head spin, and I'm going to post an updated one today on IdahoSports.com, and I had to reach out to all of these different leagues across the state. There's so many three-way ties that are in play, and every single league got back to me except for the 5A conferences. District 5 and 6, and then up north in District 1 and 2, you have the potential for a three-way tie as well, which leads me to believe they don't know, or they weren't prepared for it. I don't know. I don't want to say that, but I haven't heard back from anybody. So
and ultimately, you what you had over here in East Idaho is you had two teams that stepped up that weren't on anybody's radar to start the season, and that's Idaho Falls and Madison. Those are two teams that have stepped up and had good seasons. I think people felt for the most part it was going to be a Rigby Highland runaway in this conference, certainly Idaho Falls and Madison have raised a little havoc with that.
Yep. So again, Idaho Falls pretty much they need to win. If they lose, they're done. And even if they win, they may still be done. And it's incredible to see the turnaround.
But they have to win to even have a chance.
Correct. And Highland feels like they're going to be backed into a corner too, because if Highland ends up on the wrong way of a three-way tie, they could potentially be out too. Right. So this is what we want, right? All four of the top teams are all going to give everything they have and sell out to win because it's that important.
That's right. And that's what you want to see. You want people playing with something on the line. It makes games better. It brings out the difference in players of who can mentally handle the pressure and who cannot. Coaching staffs, are you going to come in conservative? Are you going to come in guns blazing? There's a couple different thoughts on that, and so I think from a fan perspective, we look at that and we say, well, that's the scenario we want. We want something on the line.
Yep. Plenty on the line in 5A, 4A, but there's a lot on the line in 3A and 2A as well, Lance. Sugar Salem clinched the Mountain Rivers Conference last week with a 35-7 win over South Fremont. And now the Cougars, all of a sudden, they're traveling to Driggs to play Teton Friday night. Winner of that game gets the second spot to state. This is a big win for a South Fremont team that I'll admit I was pretty high on coming into the season, and they kind of like Blackfoot. They've kind of underwhelmed me a little bit.
Yeah. They started out 3-0, and the thing that ended up hurting them was mobile quarterbacks as they got into it. In fact, my worry last week going into that game, I had Sugar picked to win that game, if you remember from our show last week. However, there were some challenges that I saw for Sugar because the one is Sugar does not have a mobile quarterback, at least not that type of mobility. We're going to get out and run the edges, and things like that. And so, but Sugar's line was just dominant, and the running game was good. The passing game was decent. The running game was really, really good. They were able to come away with that. I think South probably wins this game by 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. Teton is 1-6. They have a first-year head coach. They're trying to build that program back up. So South Fremont wins, and now, if they want to get back to the semifinals like they did last year, they're going to have to go do it on the road, Lance. They're going to be they're going to be seeded pretty low based on the Max Preps rankings. So
yeah, well, and based upon Max Prep rankings right now, I believe if it started right now, you would have Sugar and Homedale in the same half of the bracket. which would, and I could be wrong on that, but the way I was looking at it, which means there would not be even potential for a fourth year in a row of those teams playing each other in the state championship game, because it could potentially give a fairly early matchup there.
Yeah, that's right. The top 4 teams right now, Homedale is 1, Weiser is 2, Gooding is 3, Sugar is 4, which would put Weiser and Gooding on one side and Homedale and Sugar on the other. You are correct there. So Sugar does get the first round bye, which is nice, and a home quarterfinal games, and then we'll see how it goes from there. The 2A level, the nuclear conference, we're finally going to figure out. Depending on who you talk to, even stemming back to last year, right? North Fremont and Firth, right? Everyone thinks North Fremont's the best. Some people think Firth is the best. North Fremont won the regular season matchup last year. Firth won the game that counted in the semifinals. And we've had all this buildup and all this hype all season. Which team truly is better? We're going to find out Friday night. Yeah,
I'll actually be on the call on that game with Lauren Jensen Friday. And that should be a very, very good game. There's some interesting things in this game as I look at it. I like both teams, and I like what both teams bring to the field. And both teams have some significant strengths. So it's going to be who can alter the other's strength. And something that I think is going to be a real challenge for North is, Jordan Lenz is so good at getting to the edge and cutting up field. I don't know if he can get to the edge and cut up on Firth. And that takes a big chunk of their game away from them. If Jordan Lenz cannot hit that edge and then pick up some additional yards there. And I think Firth has the speed to potentially match him there on both sides of the field, whether he goes right or goes left. I think that's going to be a very interesting matchup. And again, this is one that if I was putting money on it, if it was a bet game and I was putting money on it, I'd probably put it on Firth right now. In fact, I wouldn't say probably, I would. And a lot of it comes down to that matchup that Firth had with Westside to start the season, a great Westside team that Firth took to the brink. And if those two matched up again in the state playoffs, Firth very well might win that game. And I just think I think what Firth brings to the table nullifies more of North Fremont's strengths than it is the opposite.
Yeah, and North Fremont is kind of similar to Westside in terms of Westside runs that wing T. Yeah. North Fremont likes to run that triple option. Both teams want to get to the edges. Firth's defensive line is so dominant that I agree. And I've said it all year long. I think Firth is the better team. Now, I would love for North Fremont to prove me wrong, and we could come back here next week and talk about it if I'm wrong. But I've said since the start that Firth is the better team, even though North Fremont is undefeated and Firth has the one loss. But either way, this is going to be a fantastic matchup Friday night, 7 o'clock on IdahoSports.com. Lance Taylor on the call for that contest. And regardless of what happens, both teams comfortably in the playoffs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Both teams will be top 4 seeds. So The other interesting game in the nuclear conference is West Jefferson. West Jeff right now, I think, is pretty comfortably in based upon the Max Preps rankings, Lance, and they wrap up with Salmon. This is kind of a layup for West Jefferson.
Yeah, it should be. Should be. But you never know. It's oftentimes games like this that a team feels like, like Salmon feels like, hey, we got nothing to lose. We're going to go out. We're going to pull out all stops. We're going to pull out all our trick plays and see what happens.
That is true. West J right now holds the final at-large spot in the 2A postseason. Their Max Preps ranking is actually minus 0.3, which with a winning record, I'm not sure how that's possible. But there is such a gap between they and the next team, right? The next closest team is Soda Springs in terms of at large, because Grangeville will win their district. Soda Springs is minus 11. So that's a pretty significant gap. So for West Jeff, even if it's a close win, I think they're still in pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think they've earned it. West Jefferson is again, they fall into that category this year that going in, we felt that, they didn't really have a chance of winning the conference, but they were a good enough team to raise some havoc in the conference. And they have done that.
Yeah, so they have a lot to play for here in the final week of the regular season, and here's the interesting part is that the 5 conference champions get first round byes, which means that whoever loses between North Fremont and Firth will automatically be the highest ranked at-large team. West Jefferson comes in as the last at-large team. You're looking at a conference rematch in the opening round of the playoffs.
Yeah, that's right, and very well could happen, and we'll see what happens in that scenario. However, I think East Idaho is gonna be the class of the tournament or of the playoffs for 2A.
Yep.
Well, you put West Side in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, finally at the 1A ranks, we've got a pair of de facto conference championship games this week. The 1A D1 level, Butte County taking on Grace. Both teams very comfortably in the playoffs. The only thing they're playing for here is the first round bye and a higher position on the seed line. But both teams very talented. I still think Butte County is a little bit better than Grace, but the Grizzlies have had a nice season.
Yeah, they have. And again, this is another one of those. If I was betting, I'd probably put my money on Butte County. But Grace, I had Grace for the first time this year when they were coming off of losses, undefeated in the loss column. And they've won 4 straight. Grace has done a really good job. They were a team that before the season I picked to have a really good season, and kind of disappointed me early on. But this is a matchup that I felt would be critical during this. I mean, this season, as we looked at it from a preseason standpoint, Butte stepped up, did what they needed to do. Grace took them a little bit while, but Grace is a different team now. They are better than their 4-3 record shows.
Yep, I agree 100%. So that'll be an interesting game. And then at the 1A D2 ranks, you have North Gem playing Rockland. Those are both District 5 teams, but Water Springs does clinch a playoff spot. They will finish as the 3rd seed out of District 5 and 6. That's all at the 1A D2 level. It's all predetermined. So they did clinch a playoff spot. And Water Springs, I think, is a pretty dangerous team. They will essentially travel to Castleford for their playoff opener.
Yeah, well, and the thing is Water Springs has Chalice this weekend, and Water Springs 1-6, Chalice 1-7. But I think those 2-1 out of those 2 1-win teams there, I think Water Springs is in a whole different level than Chalice is. Water Springs, again, they're better than their 1-6 record shows. They've got several explosive players. They've just struggled. They struggled in their secondary, and they're very undersized in certain critical positions. But Water Springs is good enough to even step up and throw a kind of a monkey wrench into what happens during the playoffs.
Yes, of the 8 games on Water Springs' schedule, only 2 are against teams that won't make the playoffs, Mackey and Chalice. And if they do play Castleford, this will be a rematch of a game that was played back on September 3rd. Water Springs went to Castleford and lost 58-20, but it sounds like Water Springs left some points out on the field, and Drew Blocker is such a dynamic athlete that I don't know, it'd be a fun rematch.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, even when Water Springs lost to Grace, when Grace picked up their first win of the season, Water Springs, if you looked on, if you didn't see the score, but you just looked on, how many yards offensively they picked up for the game and stuff, you'd have thought, man, this was neck and neck. But they left a lot of points just off the board through, not being able to convert, in scoring positions and so forth. So Water Springs is a much better team. Don't take that 1-6 record literally, because they're better than that.
Yeah, so a lot of exciting football, Lance. Next week, I'm very excited. I won't have to crunch the numbers anymore. It'll just be all laid out for me on a bracket. I can just get back to what I do best.
Lose and go home.
That's right. So we'll have plenty of football to talk about next week. We can start talking state volleyball, and who knows, we might be recapping some state soccer, a state soccer championship or 2 as well from East Idaho. So
that's right. State volleyball, Sugar Salem clinched. Snake River clinched yesterday. Sugar Salem has a chance to clinch tonight. They'll play the winner of South Fremont Tetons girls, who play again. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and Mackey continuing to look strong in the 1A ranks, and this is the most exciting time of the year. No,
it is.
Doubt about it. So, all right, that'll do it for this edition of the East Idaho Prepcast, brought to you by Pure Adrenaline Motorsports, your source for pulse-pounding adrenaline sports apparel and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash your inner beast. Hey, I can see myself in the reflection of your sunglasses there, Lance.
That's right. You can.
All right, well, we'll see you back here next week on another edition of the East Idaho Prepcast. For Lance Taylor, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in on IdahoSports.com.